Today I am going to show you how I make eyes for my larger scale sculptures. So what I have here are two little, I don't know, I call them marbles, but they're not really marbles. They're like these little flat glass discs that you put in like a flower vase or something like that. So I've got two of these, and I'm going to paint them on the back with nail polish. So what happens is these have a little bit of roundness to them, so it kind of gives this real illusion of a very realistic eye having that roundness there. And so I'm going to paint the iris on the back. So the iris is just the round part of your eye, and that's all we're doing here. The whites of the eyes I sculpt and paint, but these are just the irises. And when you're choosing your glass marbles, you want to make sure and choose ones that are proportional to your sculpture. So these ones are bigger, they're like an inch wide, and they're going to go on Horace the Bookworm bench because he's a really big piece. These are going to be a nice size for him. These would be pretty large. They'd give you some real anime eyes if you had like a life-size person sort of sculpture. I get a little bit smaller ones for those. But yeah, and so I'm going to paint them on the back so that, well, for a couple reasons, so that the nail polish is protected, and so that you're seeing the colors through this kind of curved area here, and it really gives that illusion of depth. And the reason I'm painting with nail polish is two reasons. One, I have lots of extra nail polish because I used to like painting my nails, but since I work so much with epoxy and paint and things, I ruin my nails immediately if I paint them. So I have all these extra colors that I never use. So that's one reason I'm using it. The other reason is that nail polish is an enamel, and so it's going to be really durable and it won't chip off of the glass. Glass is one of those very non-porous materials where if you try to paint on it with regular paint, it'll just flake off. If you did want to use regular paints instead of nail polish, you could paint it up and then you could seal it with a really good varnish. I think that would probably work just as well, but since I've got all this extra nail polish, that's what I'm going to use today. So yeah, let's paint some eyeballs. So before you get started, you're going to want to make sure that your little glass pieces are very clean. I just cleaned mine off with some rubbing alcohol. So you want to make sure that they're nice and clean so that they look good and don't have smudges and things in them. And then you're going to paint it kind of backwards. I'm going to set mine on this paper towel just to give them something kind of soft to sit on, because the front parts, we want to make sure that they're not scratched. So I'm going to go ahead and just set those on there, getting ready to paint the back. And when I say that you're painting it backwards, what I mean is that you're going to want to make sure to order your layers correctly so that it appears the right way. So I'm going to paint the pupil first. Paint the pupil first. And the pupil is always going to go right in the center of the eye. And you can just kind of decide how dilated you want that. You're just trying to get a very nice round shape here. So the smaller you make it, the less dilated it will be. That means maybe they'll look a little bit surprised or something. And yeah, so I've just got a nice black nail polish here. Starting with that. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that when you select your glass eyes, you want to make sure and get two that are roughly the same shape and size, because even if you buy you know, a big bag of these marbles, you know, they're all slightly different, so you want to just choose two that are really similar. And as you're working, you can kind of flip these over and just check your work, because the thickness and the roundness of these glass pieces will kind of magnify what you're doing with the nail polish a little bit, so it's going to appear a little bit bigger than what it really is in real life. see this one isn't quite round. It's got a little bit of irregularity to it. So what I'm going to do is I have a little shish kebab skewer here. You can get either rubbing alcohol or even nail polish remover and just put a little bit on the end here. And then you can use it to kind of clean up that edge just a little bit there. Bit bigger now that I'm looking at them. We want Horace to look nice and peaceful, not overly surprised about things. So I'm just gonna go around and add a little more here. You want to make sure to put the polish on thick enough that it's not going to be see-through at all, and sometimes you may need to do more than one layer in order to get it thick enough. That's closer to the size I want. And if you try this and it doesn't turn out the way that you wanted, you can do just like you do with your nails. You can get yourself some nail polish remover and a cotton ball or a paper towel or something and just wipe all that right off and try again. Everything else is going to center around the pupil, so that's really the part that you want to make sure and get perfect before you do anything else. I'm thinking that looks pretty good. All right, next step. Now that I've done my pupil in black, I've got some brown, and I'm going to use that to make the little lines going out around the iris. So eyes always have, if you look closely, they have little lines that kind of go out from the pupil in like a little sunburst pattern. So I'm going to add a few of those. You don't want to go overboard with these because you want to make sure that that there's still room, you know, for you to put other colors and things in there. Actually, I'm going to scrape a little bit of that off around the center because I want to leave some room to have sort of a halo around the pupil. Kind of careful with the little brush that comes with the nail polish. It's easy to make a really thick line with it. You can also get nail polish pens, which I had for a while, but they got clogged up and weren't working right anymore. But if you've got a nice steady hand, you can just use the brush that comes right with the polish. No big deal. A nice little sunburst shape. We want all the lines to be a little bit different. They don't need to be all the same because we're painting something organic, and living things always have a little bit of variation in them. They don't look all the same. No one's face is perfectly symmetrical. Alright, there's one. Some of my lines are getting a little fat here, so I'm just gonna scrape some of that right back off. Sometimes you make mistakes in art, and that's okay. The key is to catch that mistake before it's dry and before you're gonna have to work a lot harder to fix it. So now I have the pupils and the little sunburst of lines radiating out around the pupils, and I'm going to go ahead and let that dry really well before I come back and do any more. So I will see you guys in a minute. Alright, so I've let the pupil and starburst shape dry for a while. You probably want to give it at least an hour. And the next thing I'm going to put on is just a nice glitter layer. Now this stuff is really easy to overdo, so I'm just going to put a little bit, but it really adds some nice sparkle to the eyes and really makes them come alive. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And this is kind of where that halo comes in that I talked about earlier, that little blank space that I left around the pupil. So I'm going to especially focus on that area when I add this. And this is really where the doing things in the correct order matters too, because if you do a little bit of this sparkle and you do that first, then you can paint over that with your other colors, and you know your other colors will show through, but it'll have this little layer of sparkle on top. So you're basically kind of thinking backwards from what it would normally be. So whatever you paint first is going to be on top, and whatever you paint last is going to be on the bottom, which is kind of opposite of how it normally works. Like I said, it is kind of easy to overdo this stuff, so I'm just doing part of the eye. Just part of it. That's probably enough right there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little sparkle there now. And that's really going to show through nicely once we get the other colors on there. Alright, now we've got a little bit of sparkle to the eyes. I'm going to let that dry now too, and I'll come back and add some color to it. Alright, so my little sparkly layer has had plenty of time to dry now, and I am going to add some green. And at this stage, I don't need to be nearly so careful because I've already added all of my really precise elements like the pupil, the starburst, little sparkles, all of those elements are a little bit more precise. And now we're basically just filling in the rest with color. So I am going to use a couple different colors. I'm going to use a little bit darker one at the edge and a lighter one in the middle. But we're using green here to give Horace some nice green eyes. And here we go. You can really see that sparkle shining through with the green. I think that's going to look really nice when it's all done. Just coming roughly to the edge of my starburst with that green, and then I'm going to fill in the outer part with a darker green. And there we are. You can really just see the dimension and the depth that these eyes have, which, you know, is really, a lot of it has to do with the shape of the material that we're using. You know, that glass, the roundness of it really gives it some good depth there. And, you know, the different colors, the sparkles add some depth, and the different colors of green are all just kind of working together to make these eyes really, really lifelike. Yeah, so I'm going to let those dry really well, and then I'm going to go ahead and put them into Horace's head and sculpt his face around them. Thanks for watching.